Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here at the National Press Club and virtually as we release Generations United's 2022 State of Grandfamilies Report. Together at the table, supporting the nutrition, health, and well-being of grandfamilies. I'm Donna Butts. I'm the Executive Director of Generations United. And thank you again for being here and joining us today as we release this important report and celebrate all of the contributions that grandparents and relatives make every day raising children in this country. Whether you're here in person or watching the live stream, we invite those of you who want to join in on the social media and tweet along with us to please use the hashtag 2022GrandFamilies. The report and today's program materials are available from the event web link on our homepage at gu.org. As we begin today's event, I want to acknowledge a few very special people. First, the incredible grandfamily caregivers in the room who sacrifice each day to ensure our country's children grow up in safe, stable, and loving families. You'll see them because they're wearing gold ribbons, but I want them to take a moment and raise their hands so we can recognize them. So raise your hand, raise your hand. Thanks to each and every one of you for what you do every day. You truly are grand. Thank you also to Generations United board member Jerry Hall, who's with us today. We appreciate your support and service. Thank you, Jerry. And of course, we extend a deep, deep appreciation to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their support of the report and today's event, and their ongoing commitment to ensuring a national culture of health that is rooted in equity and provides every individual with a fair and just opportunity for health and well-being, no matter who they are, where they live, and how much money they have. We're thrilled to be partnering on this project with the Food Research and Action Center, who helped provide the new data in the report and lent their expertise on federal nutrition programs. We've been fan and friends for many years, so it's an honor to work with them. In November 1997, Generations United conducted the first national symposium on this new phenomenon of grandparents raising grandchildren. And that really began our 25-year odyssey working with and on behalf of the families. We've never wavered in our commitment. We're grateful that today you're joining as we release our 9th annual State of Grandfamilies Report, which shines a light on the incredible role grandparents and other relatives play in raising more than 2.5 million children in our country, and the difficulties that they face securing adequate food and nutritious food for their growing families. When children cannot remain in their parents' care, they do best in the care of grandparents and other relatives. A loving and familiar relative or close friend can help buffer the trauma of separation and provide essential roots for children. Research shows that compared to children in foster care with non-relatives, children in the care of relatives have better mental health, physical health, greater outcomes. They have higher levels of stability. They're not sent from foster home to foster home, they stay. They have a greater sense of belonging. And most importantly, they report that they feel loved. And that's so important for children. Yet they need support. They can't do it alone. So often grandparents and other relatives step into their caregiving roles really suddenly and unexpectedly. They find themselves trying to stretch their fixed incomes to buy formula, pay school fees, and put food on the table for their growing family. And I know, having at least worked with teenagers, that they usually sun themselves by the light of the refrigerator door. So it does take a lot to make sure that the children are fed and they're fed well. So they're trying to stretch that all the while trying to cover their own needs like prescription drugs and to pay the mortgage. The pandemic hit families hard. Chief among the challenges was access to adequate and nutritious food. Yet this is an issue that didn't start with the pandemic, and it continues to impact these important families. The report revealed that 1 in 4 grandparent-headed households experienced food insecurity between 2019 and 2020. That's twice the national rate of hunger. The data for older caregivers is even more stark. The rate of food insecurity for grandparents age 60 plus who are raising children with no parents in the home is 3 times higher than their peers of the same age who aren't raising children. And these families face barriers to accessing food and food assistance. Despite overwhelming need, in 2019, less than half of low-income grandparent-headed households accessed the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program, known as SNAP. This data is punctuated by powerful stories that illustrate the challenges that are familiar to the families. Kathy Coleman, who is with us today from Louisiana, explained to us, I've had calls from our people in support groups who literally call us at 9 a.m. sobbing. They didn't have anything for the children to have for breakfast. Families who are able to access food assistance tell us how critical it is. Linda Lewis, a grandmother raising 2 grandchildren in Oklahoma, said, if we didn't get SNAP, we wouldn't make it through the month with food to eat. The impact of food insecurity on grandfamilies is real, but so is our ability as a nation to address it and help the families thrive. That's what we're going to touch on today. Now, I'm thrilled to invite to the podium our partner, Alex Ashbrook, who's a director at the Food Research and Action Center, to tell us more about the critical role of federal nutrition programs and ways to better improve the support they provide to grandfamilies. So, Alex.
Thanks so much, Donna. FRAC is so proud to have collaborated with Generations United on this report that really sheds light on solutions that exist to make sure all grandfamilies have the nutrition they need to thrive. Now, unfortunately, too many grandfamilies across the country are faced with impossible choices: paying for medicine or food, paying the rent or for food. This needs to change. There's no excuse for hunger among grandfamilies when solutions exist, and we just need the political will. So policymakers need not look any further than this report to find out all the grandfamilies and their stories about how they are benefiting from the federal nutrition programs. Programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, school meals, WIC, and child care meals are our nation's first defense against hunger. They fuel health and learning of our nation's children while helping families stretch limited budgets. They're federally funded programs, and they're available in every zip code for eligible families. Yet too many grandfamilies are not participating in these programs. As Donna mentioned, less than half of grandparent-headed households who are low-income participated in SNAP, only 42%. We need to address that. There are many barriers that are creating these gaps in participation, including a widespread lack of knowledge about the programs. And we're not doing enough to reach out and inform families about these programs. And unfortunately, there is still stigma associated around participating in some programs. Again, we need to do better. Now, in addition to connecting families to these vital programs, we need to make sure these strong programs are made even stronger. So one thing we need to do is to make sure that the SNAP benefit is made adequate so that families have the nutrition they need throughout the month. We also need to harness the momentum that's building to make school meals available free for all children, regardless of household income. We saw how this approach was really important in the pandemic in mitigating food insecurity among children, and we need to make it free, healthy school meals a reality so that no grandfamily has to worry about sending a child to school without the nutrition they need to be fueled and ready to learn. We also need to help grandfamilies cover meal costs when school lets out for the summer and families lose access to school breakfast and lunch. And finally, the WIC program needs to be modernized so that it's easier to access WIC. And we need to lock in a temporary benefit increase that allowed families to access more fruits and vegetables. The federal food programs also need to be strengthened to ensure that we're addressing racial equity and addressing disparities in participation. As you heard, we need to address disparities in food insecurity rates among grandfamilies as well. So we encourage you to join FRAC in making these policies a priority. Hungry grandfamilies can't wait. And we also can't wait to get you engaged. So hopefully by the end of today, you can do two things. One is to visit frac.org to see the bills we're watching, and the other is to register for the FRAC Action Network so that you can contact your members of Congress to make these policy changes that will help all grandfamilies access the nutrition they need to thrive. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you mentioning some of the recommendations and things that are so close to FRAC's heart and to the partnership work that we do together. It's wonderful. So the report picks up on those federal programs and makes a series of recommendations. In addition to what Alex was talking about, but what the report really points out are recommendations for practitioners and researchers to better serve the families. So first, I'd like to acknowledge and thank somebody who was very important in this report, and that's the author, Amy Goyer. We're delighted that Amy could be here with us today and for how skillfully she helped us tell this story. So thank you, Amy. The recommendations in the report include expanding access to SNAP by making a child-only benefit that's based on the needs of a child as opposed to the household income. What a lot of people don't realize is that oftentimes children are not allowed to access the program because their caregivers were wise enough to save for their own retirement. Children shouldn't go hungry because their caregivers were careful financially. We should ensure automatic access to free and reduced school meals for children living in grandfamilies. Kids should be able to eat even while their caregivers navigate red tape. We need to develop quality kinship navigator programs which connect grandfamilies to food and nutritious support and services in their own communities. These programs are working and can be implemented in every state. We need to improve outreach for existing federal nutrition programs like SNAP and WIC to better reach more grandfamilies and connect them with benefits that they're eligible for and should be receiving. They need to know that the programs serve their families. Create joint meal programs for grandfamily caregivers and the children they raise. It was startling to learn during the pandemic that programs could deliver meals to seniors, but not the children that were in their living rooms. And there were programs that could feed children, but not the grandparents who were raising them, who were standing beside them. We have artificially segregated our policies and programs by age, and we need to think of families as families and whole units. So it's really thinking it holistically. We know that recommendations, however, can only be made a reality with the support of committed champions and dedicated advocates. Because of this, I'm pleased to now introduce and present our annual Grandfamilies Champion Award. The Generations United Grandfamilies Champion Award is presented to a leader for their exceptional actions to improve policies that help grandfamilies. Today, we're thrilled to honor Representative Jim McGovern of Massachusetts. Congressman McGovern has introduced, supported, and championed legislation specifically designed to help grandfamilies, including the Grandfamilies Housing Act, the Supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Act, which resulted in the creation of a federal council that was co-chaired by our own Jaya Lent and involved many of the grand voices that we're fortunate enough to work with. So that council released a very important report to Congress with recommendations to support the families. And now it's up to all of us to make sure that it doesn't sit on a shelf. But in his role as the chair of the House Rules Committee, Chairman McGovern held a hearing on food insecurity and its impact and the impact on seniors and multi-generational families, and highlighted the experience of grandfamilies. He's been a tenacious champion whose tireless efforts led to the recent White House Conference on Hunger, Nutrition, and Health, which resulted in a broad strategy that included recommendations that would help improve outreach to grandfamilies to help them better access SNAP. Chairman McGovern is unable to join us in person today, but he sent these heartfelt remarks to share with you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to accept the Grandfamilies Champion Award, and I want to thank Generations United for their dedication to improving the lives of intergenerational families all across the country. For years now, helping grandfamilies has been one of my top priorities here in Congress. I've held several community meetings and events across Massachusetts with grandparents raising grandchildren and asked them about the unique challenges that they face. I've heard about how many of these grandparents didn't have the time to prepare financially, about the challenges of finding housing suited for raising children, and far too often they don't know where to turn to access government assistance that they're eligible for. These grandparents and older adults always tell me that they're proud to have stepped up when their grandchildren needed a place to live and a family to raise them, but it's not easy. And that's why I filed the Grandfamily Housing Act, which would help nonprofits and local housing authorities provide a safe living space for grandfamilies and finance the upkeep of grandfamily housing in communal spaces. The funds would also allow nonprofits and housing providers to hire a grandfamily resident service coordinator to help grandparents navigate the complexities of raising a grandchild, whether that's applying to college, finding medical records, or accessing government assistance like SNAP or WIC. Which brings me to another major problem that I've heard from grandfamilies around my district and also across the country, and that is food insecurity and hunger. I'm disappointed I couldn't join you in person for the release of the State of Grandfamilies Report, but I'm glad you're focusing on such an important topic. Supporting the nutrition, health, and well-being of grandfamilies is vital, and I'm grateful to everyone at Generations United for leading in this effort. One of the ways I've tried to bring more attention to the disproportionately high rate of hunger amongst grandfamilies was by holding a Rules Committee roundtable on hunger among seniors and multi-generational families. I want to thank Executive Director Donna Butts for coming to testify and sharing how important it is that grandfamilies are included in that conversation. Gathering data and policy recommendations is incredibly important, but I think we're all ready for more action from the federal government. That's why I'm working every day to ensure any end-of-year package includes the Grandfamily Housing Act and my medically tailored meals bill, which would allow certain Medicare enrollees to have healthy meals delivered to their homes. These new programs will go a long way, but we need to think bigger if we want to solve the hunger problem here in America. That's why I'm proud to have secured the funding for the second ever White House Conference on Health, Hunger, and Nutrition. And I want to thank President Biden for holding this conference in September. It brought public, private, nonprofit stakeholders together and with people with lived experience to make a plan to end hunger and increase healthy eating and physical activity in the United States by 2030. The conference concluded with a number of commitments from the Biden-Harris administration aimed at reducing hunger and diet-related diseases among older adults. Everything from expanding nutrition education to bolstering the current nutrition programs serving our seniors. Look, I'm excited to continue this fight, and I'm asking all of you to continue to track the progress we're making. Please get involved and work with us to make the goals of this conference a reality. Thanks again for presenting me with the Grandfamilies Champion Award, and more importantly, thank you for the critical work that you do to help our grandfamilies.
Please join me in thanking Congressman McGovern. He has been at this for so many years. You have to just really appreciate the dedication and commitment that he's had. So we're delighted to be able to partner with him. I also wanted to mention that the White House Conference, which was recently held, we were fortunate to have one of our newest staff members there representing grandfamilies and multi-generational families, and that's Chelsea Rhodes. So thank you, Chelsea. So now we get to the meat and the heart of the program today, and that is that we have a stellar panel to speak firsthand about the challenges and the strengths of grandfamilies as they relate to food and nutrition. We're thrilled to have Michelle Singletary join us today and facilitate the panel. Michelle is an author and nationally syndicated columnist known for her personal finance column, The Color of Money, which appears in the Washington Post and is syndicated across the country. Her writing often references the financial wisdom of her grandmother, Big Mama, who helped to raise her. Recognizing her personal connection to grandfamilies, Michelle is consistently generous with her time when it comes to Generations United, either facilitating conversations or speaking at events for us. This means a lot to us, and it also means a lot to grandfamilies who look proudly at Michelle as a grand success. You can find Michelle and our panelists' bios on our website. We're so pleased to have you with us today, Michelle. Thank you. I invite you and the panelists to come on up.
Hear me okay? Oh yeah, that's good, wow. Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here and to have such a wonderful panel. We had a chance to talk on a Zoom call. I'm just delighted to have you. And thank you so much, Donna. I'm just thrilled to be able to facilitate this panel. You have heard compelling statistics about the impact of food insecurity on grandfamilies, but we know that their stories and hearing directly from real life experiences is what helps us really understand this topic. And as Donna mentioned, I went to live with my grandmother when I was 4. There was 5 of us. Can you all imagine? 5. I have 3 kids, and I don't even want them kids. So the fact that my grandmother took 5 of us in, she literally rescued us from foster care. My oldest sister was 8, I was 4, a sister who was 3, and twin brothers who were just about 2 years old. And it was tough, and my grandmother was this proud Southern grandmother, and she didn't take the financial payments, but she did take the medical, and she did take they called them food stamps then, and she was quite embarrassed to take it. And she hated going to the store and using them. And she tried to find times to go when people wouldn't see it. And when we talk about food insecurity, we always talk about kids who have no food, but there's also different gradations in that. So in our case, we never went hungry, but there was not always enough. And I don't know if you ever experienced that. So we would have a meal, and it would be just enough to keep the hunger at bay, but you always had this sense of hunger. And 5 of us, and I'm a really slow eater. And we'd be sitting at the table, and my siblings would just, wolf down their food, and I'm still picking, and then we go, "You gonna eat that chicken? You gonna eat that chicken?" And I had to hover over my food to keep them from eating my food. Those are my memories of food. And so I'm very sensitive to this topic. So today I'm honored to facilitate a panel of incredible people, and I want to introduce you to them. And you can learn more about them in the program, and there's a link. But we have Kathy Coleman, who's a grandparent raising her 6 grandchildren, had my grandmother beat, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She also runs the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Information Center of Louisiana. Now, how you have time to do that and raise those kids is amazing. And then we have Eugene Vickerson, a grandfather and advocate who stepped in to raise his granddaughter and grandson in Atlanta, Georgia. And then we have Chelsea Rhodes, who was raised by her great-grandmother in Dayton, Ohio. She now serves as the Public Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for Generations United. So Kathy and Eugene, I'm going to start with you guys. Let's begin. Can you all tell me how you ended up with your grandchildren? So I think it's interesting to sort of just let folks know how you ended up doing what you do, because it's an amazing thing to step in.
Okay, I'm Eugene Vickerson from Atlanta. And my grandson came with me when he was about 6 or 7 years old. But it was a gradual progression. My daughter would either forget or neglect to pick him up, and so they would call me. And it began with him just staying with me for the night, for example, or until she came to pick him up. And then it led to a week and then a month. And then eventually she would get into trouble with the legal system, and then I had to start being concerned about paperwork and school, and even, you know how the schools are now. When you go to a school, you got to have the credentials. They don't even let you in. So I had to start dealing with birth certificates, you know, yada, yada, yada. And then my granddaughter came. She was 16 months old. And it just so happened I was sitting outside on the porch, which I tried to spend a lot of time doing. And let me just speed it up just a little bit. And this person drove up, and they had a bassinet, and a baby was in the bassinet. And she walked up and asked if I was Eugene. I said, yeah, I am. Yeah. And she said, I have your granddaughter here, and either you keep her or we put her in protective services. And it was just like that. It was not even a real introduction, and for me, it was brutal, because that's just not the way it should be done, you know. And she had an open bag of chips and a half a bottle of pop. And I said, what's that? She said, well, this is the food that I brought. And I said, well, that's not food, you know. So that started our relationship. I'm plant-based. I've been plant-based for a long time, over 50 years. And so she didn't bring anything else, no potty, no bed, no Pampers, no car seat, nothing. And I think at that time I was like 60, maybe 62, 63 years old.
You mean just a year ago?
Well, and so that's the start of it. And the rest was just trauma in regards to dealing with protective services, because there was no blueprint, no guidelines. And they purposefully kept information from us, because when you keep information from people, you can control them better. And I later found out that threat, they didn't want that baby. See, I didn't know it at the time. I was dealing with emotion. And she got me on that, of course. Everybody's going to get me on that one. But they really don't want those children, because they don't want to get in trouble if something were to happen, you know, yada, yada, yada.
Thank you
So,
for sharing that story.
yes.
Appreciate that.
Yes.
Kathy, how did you end up with your 6 grandchildren?
It wasn't easy. We started off with our granddaughter, brought her home from the hospital, and my daughter didn't bond with her. And we thought maybe that was the problem. She loved her, but it was a problem. We didn't realize that 12 years later, my daughter would pull up in the driveway and bring us 5 grandbabies. And she said, I'm having some issues and I just can't deal with this. And what we initially thought was going to be, you know, a week or a month, you know, to kind of get things straightened out, has turned into an ongoing process, and it's been years. And, you know, in the South, well, everywhere, but especially the South, you step up. You do what you need to for these babies.
Yeah, you just do, right. Chelsea, tell me a little bit how you ended up with and then we're going to get into some more meaty stuff, well, this is quite meaty, actually. But Chelsea, how did you end up with your great-grandmother?
Yeah, so I was always very close with my, I called her my granny, or I call her my granny, and she babysat me from when I was, you know, my mom went back to work immediately. And then when my parents, particularly my dad, had substance abuse issues and had ended up incarcerated, and so I eventually ended up with my granny, mostly because it either wasn't safe for me at my parents' house, because he used to come back, and yeah, so she stepped in. It was an informal relationship, but she cared for me and never had custody of me, but really stepped in and cared for me.
So we're talking about food insecurity. How has that impacted your families, your situation? Since we ended with you, Chelsea, how did food insecurity impact you growing up with your great-grandmother?
Yeah. Similar to what you were saying earlier, it wasn't that there was no food in the house, we were going hungry, but it was just stressful. I always remember being so concerned about money and where the next meal was going to come from, and I felt guilty for, I'm like, oh, I don't want to, maybe I'll skip breakfast today to save this bagel for tomorrow. And so that stress really, really affected me as a child. And I think it forced me to grow up quicker because I've always been, I guess, a very mature kid. But the food insecurity in particular kind of made me feel like I had to be the perfect kid and not get into trouble because there was so many other things going on. And all the adults in my life were, they're worried about how to put food on the table. So I'm like, oh, of course I'll go help extra with chores or
That's such
like
an
that.
interesting point. Don't you all think about that? Because we think about it just as people being hungry. But what you just talked about is the repercussions of that. You could go two ways. You try to be the perfect kid or you be the troublesome kid. Now we understand why kids are doing it. There's all this stress going on that is directly tied to your ability to, just reach in the refrigerator and get something and not have to worry about that. Kathy, how has food insecurity impacted 5, 6? I can't even imagine.
It's a revolving door. No matter what you put in it, you turn around in an hour and it's gone. It's just gone. I too was raised by my grandmother, and I was taught how to be very frugal. And I don't know how many of you know in Louisiana, beans and rice is a favorite. Jambalaya, we could make rice in any way you wanted, and it helped us to stretch things. So it wasn't always the healthiest foods, the salads and stuff. It was whatever we need to put on the table without letting the children know that there wasn't a problem. And the 5 that came to me had been struggling with eating, and they would hide food in their room. They'd get plates and go in their room, and it just was very disheartening to me to see that they were still hungry. You never filled them up. Yeah. They always felt like they needed, just a little bit more. Yeah. Even when you knew they were full, they needed more.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that because I'm like that too. I hide food. I can't throw away food. All 3 of my adult children live with us, and my oldest will go through the refrigerator. It's like, how long has this been here? I'm going to eat that. Even if it's got a little mold, that's okay. That's good for you. Penicillin. It's going to be penicillin. It still lives with me to this day. Now, being a plant-based, and I've tried that. How did that work?
It didn't go well with my grandson because and when I look back, there were things I could have done different. I could have been just a little bit tougher on him, but I felt like he needed so much love and nurturing, and so I couldn't beat him up too much, because he was.
He wanted the chicken, you like,
Well, let's do something else. But anyway, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, we go by, what's this thing called? Subway.
You don't even know the name
of
it.
Well, no. But let me just say what's important, though. What's important was that he was diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
And so I'm a research guy. So the worst thing for someone with ADHD, 2 things: lack of stability, and then some of these foods, ice cream, candy, sodas, fast foods. And so what some of the grandparents, and I was president of a group in DeKalb County, and so we had these kind of conversations all the time. And what some of the grandparents did to address indirectly the food issue was, if a child had a disability, they would highlight that, and that will allow them a better opportunity to get better services. So they get a little bit more money, and that's how they learn to deal with it. Now, what I chose to do was, I had a garden. I had a garden before the children came, so we ate out of the garden. And so my granddaughter, when she would go to school, for example, but I had her from the beginning. That's the difference. My grandson was already chicken nuggets, macaroni and cheese, French fries.
Don't hate on the chicken nuggets.
I'm not. I'm just saying.
But I understand,
Yeah,
right?
and the thing is, he's 22 now. And so when he came to visit me recently, I said, he said, "We got some food?" I said, "Yeah." He got an apple. I said, "When was the last time you had an apple?" "When I left your house." So he really hasn't embraced the healthy food, you know, but.
That must have been really stressful for you, like your philosophy, and then trying to get them to eat healthy, and then I mean, I'm joking,
Right.
but your way is more healthy.
Right, but the way I dealt with it though, my house, I had a flexible rate loan, and I couldn't pay it anyway. So what I did, I used my house note money, and I ended up having to file bankruptcy a couple of times to keep the house. But fortunately, as often as the case, things worked out. So I used that money we ate really good, and my grandson knew he had to have at least 2 greens. When we go somewhere to eat, and I didn't cook at that time. I didn't know how to do some things, you know. We go somewhere to eat, he had to get two green foods. He knew that, to the point where he would wait, you know, they'd ask him what he want, and he would point at whatever, and everybody just giving praise. And as they started giving him praise, he started embracing that, you see? Now that's publicly, but when we're home, when we pass the Subway, or what's the other one? Chick-fil-A. Oh, man.
See?
Because they did this experiment.
Yeah.
You've seen the experiment where they keep the buns out and see which one spoils the quickest. The Chick-fil-A spoiled the quickest, which means they had better
Okay,
bread.
we're gonna move on.
Yeah.
So Kathy, with 6 grandchildren, how did you budget for the meals in your household?
Girl, you didn't budget. You did what you had to. If you had extra money, then you bought better things. I was fortunate that we had different friends that did gardening, and you know we would get things. There was no budget. It was the night before you plan what you're going to do for breakfast, dinner, and supper. You're so grateful when the children go to school because that's one less meal you have to worry about, you know. And we've exhausted all our money, all our retirement and everything. It took everything we had just, you know, to keep up. Between the food and the legal cost, it's overwhelming. Yeah. And you just try to do what you can to ensure the safety of these children.
Did you ever go without so that they could have?
Oh, all the time. You can't tell it, but all the time, I'm going to tell you, you know, you just get to where they used to say, you know, why do you drink coffee all the time? Why do you drink tea? You know, but when you sit there and you look at the amount you have, and you never want them to know. Yeah. You never want them to suspect it, just. And fortunately, you know, it worked out well in our case because our babies did good.
Yeah, that's great.
You know.
Chelsea, you talked about, as a child, having to calculate what you're eating. How has that impacted you now as an adult and your eating habits now?
I do struggle some with disordered eating. I will skip meals a lot, and I have to be very intentional about making sure that I'm getting my greens. And because I used to not eat very healthy growing up, because same with Kathy, my granny, you know, stretched her budget as much as she could. And so with the disordered eating, and then also being more intentional about making sure that I have those vegetables, because before it was like, oh, it's an extra like bonus if you get to eat veggies or fruit. And whereas now, like I you know, creating stability for myself, and I'm like, no, you deserve to have vegetables and have fruits and foods that nourish your body. And so I try to not think about how much it costs. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So we're here talking about policy and legislation. You know, what programs benefited you the most? And if you had a magic wand and you could get those knuckleheads on Congress to actually come together in peace, what do you think that they should do? I'll start with you, Mr. Bixley.
Yeah, I'm thinking. Well, the first thing, the biggest problem I had, well, not necessarily the biggest, but one of the major problems I had was the food that was prepared for lunch. So the children who get free lunch, some of that's not real food, you know. And of course, if I'm into plant-based and, you know, vegetables, and personally try to get as much organic stuff as I can because of the pesticides and yada, yada, yada. So I had a real big problem with my granddaughter because they wanted to insist that she drank milk, and we don't do milk. and of any kind. And so it's so the education, you know, and I think I did. Is Wick the one with the cheese?
Yeah, I remember the big blocks of cheese.
Yeah.
They make good grilled cheese sandwiches, though.
Yeah. And so I found out I couldn't even work with that. I didn't qualify for some stuff, and the stuff that I did qualify for wasn't the kind of food that I wanted to give. Right. So my granddaughter, eventually I had to put her in a different school because the school where she was, it was just too much bickering over. So, you know, I started getting up early and preparing her lunch. So we'd have breakfast, so I knew she had a healthy breakfast. And I prepared her lunch, she loves salads. You wouldn't believe it. And people say, well, how you get her to eat salads? I said, well, I eat salads. We eat salads. That's all she's had all her life. So if she wants to eat, that's what she's going to eat. And so she loves it.
So if you had a magic wand, what would you?
I don't know because it's so complicated. For what I'm concerned, I think enough information about diet, like for example, the children with ADHD. You don't need the Ritalin, you don't need the medication, maybe not. But let's try these simpler things that we can control and we can do right now.
So the information, because there's some kids who do need it, but what you're saying is that we need to have programs that have flexibility. I think that's what Donna talked about, right? Like for each child. Definitely. So there are kids who might need the medicine, but kids who may benefit without it if they had better food choices, right?
I agree wholeheartedly. It's just like the thing about medicine is sometimes you need medicine. That's what you do. My son is a psychiatrist, so some patients he can do aromatherapy, he can use herbs, but some patients they need an injection right now, just to be able to work with them because they're so out of control. You see, so I agree, you're 100%. But let's do the less invasive things first. Let's try to maybe not eat 2 donuts. Let's eat a half a donut. That's what I'm saying. So in terms of a community or governmental, I really don't know of one. I really don't. There's a health program at Morehouse Medical where they do education to the community, and so I tried to share that. Actually, I had her come and speak with our grandparent group, and she talked about different foods and the impacts that they have on behavior for children and adults. You know, that sugar, everybody knows about the sugar, you know, so there are other things you can do besides sugar.
That's good.
Yeah.
Kathy, you're very active in the community. You're active with other grandparents, parents and grandfamilies. What would you, if you had a magic wand, I know, right? She's already rolling her
I would
eyes.
be spinning it. I would start with the WIC office and make the WIC program more flexible for the families that are raising children, not theirs, and the foods that they get accessible. I would go for the food stamps and appropriate it to the children, not to the families, because there are children that are being claimed on other people's SNAP benefits or whatever, and the children doesn't even reside there, and where the families are need the services. I would go to for the legal services where, you know, when we have children through DCFS and the state helps them with the court cost and you got CAS and all, that's not the way it happens with families who just step up to help these children. You know, it's not a competition. And all we want, not only myself personally, but with the Information Center, and our Dot Thibodeau worked with Amy for a long, long time. And, you know, everybody's just trying to step up and do what's best for these children. Yeah. You know, so if we could get things afforded to the children, don't take away grandparents' retirement benefits and their assets. You know, you can't get food stamps because you have a camper in the yard. You know what I'm saying? It's unheard of. So if we could do that, you know, and give support to these families, because all of these children have a mental problem when you go through this. Yeah. So we need all the help.
Yeah, that's really good. You see, I love, each of you have touched on all kinds of things, healthy, mental health, getting, you know, making sure the bureaucracy works. How am I doing on my time? Because how much do I have left? 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Wow, did that go by fast, didn't it, y'all? So you work in this field, Chelsea. If you had a magic wand, what would you say in terms of policies? And you know, you've lived it. What could they change? What could they do now to help these families that were much like you?
Yeah, the 2 things that come to mind immediately is free school meals for all and a child-only SNAP benefit that Kathy was talking about. With free school meals, I was very grateful to be in a good program that we were actually allowed to have salads and had a better variety than Eugene's experience. But with the recertification every year, at the beginning of the school year, I would often accumulate lunch debt. Also had teachers step in to pay for my lunches so that I could get, the regular lunch instead of the Uncrustable with water. And so establishing free school meals for all with automatic enrollment, I think is so important to make sure that kids aren't going through this, because now that I work in this space, I'm like, why do we do this to 8-year-olds?
Right.
And it's really sad.
Can I throw something in there for you? And if you're watching at home or you watch this later, the one thing that I've experienced when I've written about this, and Chelsea, I want you to address this since you work in this area, is that when we talk about increasing these benefits and changing it, school is for all, people will say that, what about the parents? Why didn't they step up? And they actually criticize that the children are in this situation. How does that make you feel when they do that? Because they, well, we shouldn't have to be doing this. Well, tell that to the little 6-year-old sitting at the table whose parents, for whatever reason, didn't step up. Not your fault, Jordan did. I mean, I'm sure you were a great dad, best you could. How do you feel about that when they say things like that?
Well, that lack of empathy, that lack of consideration, that lack of, because I've heard the same thing, like what you were saying, wait and go when not that many people may be at the store. But the shame, or I've heard people complain, well, yeah, I saw somebody with a food stamp and they got chicken. Why couldn't they get some bologna? It's just crazy. I'm not sure what it's all about in terms of culture, but that's one of the reasons for me, because of my personality, it was easier for me to use my mortgage money and just circumvent all that foolishness and have my garden than to deal with the foolishness. But again, the grandparents, whenever we have a meeting, we always would have a talk session, and they would talk about what was going on in their lives. That always came up. The lack of respect, the lack of consideration, because you need help. And everybody needs help. The people who get the PhDs, somebody help you. You didn't do it on your own. But it's a myth that I made this, I'm a self-made man, I'm a self-made this. You're not self-made anything. And I'm just saying, no, but just look at the reality. So it's reality and truth. Then you got these false narratives to try to prove. It's crazy. That's what I feel about it. It's crazy.
Right. What about you, Kathy?
Michelle, when we have children in foster care, and thank God for the people out there who's willing to step up, but they have all these things afforded to them. They get a stipend when they get a child. They get beds. They get clothes. They get a monthly allowance. They get all these things. But you know what? You take a biological grand family that stepped up for the children. And might I add, we didn't do nothing wrong to get these babies. But I'm going to tell you what, we're going to step up for them. So it's not about the money for us. And when my 5 came, I didn't say, my God, what's it going to cost in groceries and school, whatever. I said, of course they can stay, and then you go and you try to find out. So why don't we afford the families willing to step up for these children? And listen, a lot of these families are in this situation. We're talking drugs are prominent. We're talking mental health issues. People didn't set out to just have children and not raise them. Let's just be honest. Grandparents didn't step out to say, I've slept in enough this morning, the last month. Let me go find some more kids to get me up at 5 in the morning. Did I add I'm not a morning person? Hello, that's not me, So we didn't ask for it, but you know what we do? We step up. Whether it's your baby, it doesn't matter to us. Every child deserves the best we can give them. And right now, every child is suffering because we're not giving it to them.
That's right. So I am so out of time, and I could have sit here and talked to you guys for another hour, and we could swap stories. But just to wrap it up, and I hate to do this, but 20 seconds or less. Chelsea, what advice would you give to grandfamilies who are in this situation, especially with inflation, right? And we know the Fed's meeting, and their inflation rate is going to probably go up some more, costing more. It impacts, the cost of goods. So what advice would you give to grandfamilies?
I would say, wow, that's it. I don't know what to say. That's okay. I would say to stay strong and to use all the resources that can be afforded to you. I think to try to ignore the stigma around federal nutrition programs, because we see these numbers. Under half participate in SNAP, but it could be so helpful. And so I think kind of swallowing your pride and accepting help is so important, and in teaching your grandchildren that accepting help is okay. And so that's I guess really what I would say.
That's so good. You're absolutely right. Kathy?
My grandmother used to tell us, when you wake up in the morning, you give thanks to God because your eyes woke up, and then you tell yourself, what can I do to help one person today? And in my case, it was the families. And I'd just like to take the time to say, I don't know where we would be without the people like Generations United, Jaya, Amy, Donna Buds, the people that have helped us from a little town in Louisiana. And our families have benefited so very much for the things that Generations United have helped us to overcome and achieve. And you know what? All these grandparents or grandfamilies out there, they need to just suck it up, Buttercup. We're going to raise these babies, and we're just going to go on. Do what you have to do, and let's roll.
Suck it up, Buttercup. That is hashtag that. Hashtag suck it up, Buttercup. I like that.
That's it.
And Eugenia, you got 10 seconds, because I'm going to give you 10, you're going to take 30.
I know.
That's all right. I can listen to you talk all day.
I know. My thing with the grandparents, and like I said, I've been involved with a bunch of groups in Atlanta, and continue to be unstoppable. You just got to be, and that's what they've been doing. You have all the answers. You figured out the solutions to all the problems. You have to make yourself heard, even if you have to break the door in and make yourself heard. And so to Generations United, I'm going to piggyback on what you're saying. A lot of the information that I've gotten has been a result of coming to these meetings and being involved. Because on the local level, see, we need to talk about that too, the Southern politics and the state's rights issues, so that money that's allocated to the state for the grandparents in these programs never get to us. I wouldn't have known that it even existed had I not been involved with this. So that's something that's really got to be addressed, We don't want to just get this, I'm taking all these books, as many as I can take, back and pass them out so they can at least see outside, what's happening outside the cave, It's light out there, So, but yeah, just keep being unstoppable.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to try and end without crying, which is totally not possible. But Chelsea, thank you for what you're doing and actually coming from that and giving back in the job that you do. Kathy, thank you so much for what you do. And those 6 babies, and having been one of those kids, I don't know where I would be without my grandmother. She hadn't stepped in and saved me from foster. I am who I am today because she stepped up.
And she's still there. She's not going to leave you.
She's not. And you, my goodness, I'm going to eat more vegetables. So please give a hand to our panel. Back to you, Donna.
All right, nobody told me we had to start putting Kleenex on the tables. That was really terrific. I so appreciate everything that you were willing to share and helping to provide, really it's the stories that matter. It's the real life, it's the faces, and you just did such a wonderful, wonderful job sharing your stories with people and your thoughts, so thank you for that. It really reminded me of a couple of things, and one is that we know that it's never, ever the fault of a child. It's never the fault of a child. And there have been times where people have said in this country, we love children, we just hate their parents. We just blame their parents. So we need to remember it's never the fault of the child. And also, that kids will age out of a system, but they'll never age out of a family. They know they can go back, they can sleep on your couch, they can look and see what's in the refrigerator, But when you're part of a system, you don't have that to go back to. So we really do owe a debt of gratitude to people who are doing their work in honor of their grandparents and who are doing the work every day of raising grandchildren. So thank you. And Chelsea also reminded me that we're really fortunate because my husband keeps a candy bowl full at the office, and now I'm going to ask him to also bring broccoli in. To Eugene, yeah, when they say, what happened to the candy? You'll be able to find the report on our website and soon the recording of this session. We strongly encourage you to share it broadly using the hashtag GrandFamilies2022 and use the findings and recommendations as advocacy tools. Your voice is needed to make a difference and successfully tackle the barriers to securing adequate and nutritious food for grandfamilies. One way to do that is to begin planning now, and this is our plug, planning now to join us here in Washington, D.C. for Generations United's Global Conference in July 2023. Soon you can find out more information about that on our website, and that'll include details about our Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill, where we'll be taking some of these messages to our members, and we need your voices to be a part of that. But reports, events, and team and leading change, they don't happen in a vacuum. The Generations United team consists of an amazing group of smart, passionate, and compassionate people. Please join me in thanking Team GU. Raise your hands. Team GU. All right. But as we all know, every team needs a leader, so I want to give an extra loud shout out to the person who led the development of the report and this event, the Assistant Director of our National Center on Grandfamilies, Jamal Clark. Jamal? I was teasing him yesterday while he was looking at the report saying, you're going to take those home and sleep with them, aren't you? It was so nice to see the results of your work, and you did a fabulous job. Thank you. But I know everybody did their part too, so we appreciate that. So I want to thank you for joining us today around the table and around the country. As we wrap up today, remember, hunger knows no age limit, and hunger hurts. It's a hurt that we can address and change together. Thank you. And the panel.